joyful I am free, I awake in thy light. Hello friends, today is Monday, October 25th, and this is the noon broadcast of the unpublished writings of Paramhansa Yogananda. I'd like to talk about colds and flu today. You can only imagine why. A number of my friends are dealing with COVID. They're all fine, meaning they don't require hospitalization. Most of them are young and healthy. But, you know, it's a lot like having a lousy cold or flu. And when I researched standard medical treatments for COVID at home, not requiring hospitalization, that is, the treatments are identical to what they tell you to do for a cold and flu. So I researched what Paramhansa Yogananda said to do about cold. Now, he does not use the word flu. The flu had already occurred. Millions died in the Spanish flu, so I found it curious that he didn't mention it. But I suspect that in May of 1932, it perhaps was still unclear what to do about the flu. After all, millions had died, and they too were wearing masks and things. So I'm going to believe that if you do have COVID, and it particularly gets in your chest and sinuses and resembles a cold or has, symptoms like a cold, that some of what he has to say might interest you. Okay, so the first thing he says is when you catch a cold, fast, complete fast for 2 days. Because of the extra poisons in your body, that way not to burden the body with the process of digestion and food. But he says if you cannot bear up under a complete fast, then eat apples, pears, or grapes. But do not eat acid fruits. That would be like oranges, I suppose, and lemons. Interesting, because a lot of people do use lemon when they have a cold, but maybe just a little bit. He says, do not eat anything at night. Now, I interpret that to mean that people don't usually get up in the middle of the night to eat, so I think what he means is dinner. Okay? Do not drink hot, colder water, but only 2 glasses of tepid or a little warmer than room temperature, tepid water each day. He goes on to explain that if you're suffering from, nasal drip and having to blow your nose a lot, then the water just adds to that outflow. So if you're not having that symptom, that's probably not as important. You'll laugh at this one, those of us in the Pacific Northwest anyway. He says take a 4-hour sun bath. It's been known to cure a cold in almost instantly. Well, not going to do us any good here. Then he goes on. This is a treatment he recommends to do at night if you have a cold, which is, he calls it a Turkish bath towel, but I think that's what we call a terry cloth towel, or for most of us, that's what our towels are like. So in any case, take a towel and get it as hot as possible. I imagine taking a pot, putting it on the stove, and bringing it to at least a near boil and soaking that towel. Then what he's trying to do is open all of the pores of the body in order to let out poisons. And so he says, take that hot towel, rub your throat, obviously sore throat, chest, back, feet, and hands. And then he says, put your feet in as hot a water as your feet can stand before going to bed. And then get into bed and cover yourself up with plenty of warm blankets. Repeat this every night until your chest cold is gone. A few other recommendations he makes is to drink fruit juices, but not cold, at a natural temperature in the morning. Now next one is an interesting recommendation. I've seen it in his other writings, and I don't really understand it in biological terms, but He says, eat plenty of lettuce at your heaviest meal, which he says should be at noon. Eat fruit and ground nuts at night. Now, he doesn't repeat the issue about acid fruits, but in this particular part of things, but meaning eat very lightly. Don't drink or eat anything before going to bed. Okay, and then he explains that opening the pores of the body allows the unbalanced heat in the body to pass through the skin surface. This extra heat, unless it is let out, passes through the mucous membranes of throat and lungs, etc. So I haven't had COVID at this point. I've been vaccinated, so but when I got my booster shot the other day, unlike my first two vaccination shots, I felt pretty punky. It was that kind of pre-flu, slightly aching, just slight headache thing. And it lasted, I don't know, maybe 24 hours. I took Tylenol, I think it was, for that. But one night I went to bed quite early and slept for 12 hours or 11 hours anyway, and it was gone. But, some people have it go down in their chest, as we know, in severe cases requiring hospitalization, etc., etc. So I'm not talking about those severe cases. But if your symptoms of COVID are more like a cold, I think you'll find this helpful. In any case, if you have the chills and have that achy feeling, the sort of hot towel system that he's talking about, he doesn't mention a hot bath, which I find curious. And I cannot help but think it would be a good idea. Maybe he was thinking not everybody has a bath, a bathtub. I don't know. That can be back in his day, 1932, when still many more people lived in rural areas than do today. Maybe he just thought that making a hot bath was just way too much work, so he recommended hot towels. So, but the idea there is to heat the body up with warm and wet, open the pores, and then having opened the pores, jump into bed for the night under warm blankets. So that's part of it. And then the fasting part, I think, applies mostly at the onset of symptoms, but I suppose you could try it otherwise. What's the little cliche, starve a cold and feed a fever? Unfortunately, COVID can have both symptoms, so not sure. But maybe this will be helpful to some of you, and I think I'll leave it off there for today. Okay, well, that's it, folks. Be well, be happy,